Greetings, my name is Kerry and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking to you about my reading stats for February. So in my January wrap up, you may remember I said, if you've seen it, that I'm now going to be sharing with you a lot more stats about what I've been reading each month, to do with ratings and diversity and all sorts of different things. Because my wrap-ups have tended to be quite long anyway, and particularly for months where I've read quite a lot of books, I didn't want to make those videos crazy long by having a load of stats that take up a lot of time and then talking in a lot of detail about all the books. So what I'm going to try this month and see if it works, and I'm going to do two separate videos. The first one, this one, is going to tell you some of the breakdown of some of the stats and allow me to go in a bit more detail about the stats. Also in this video I'm just going to be highlighting my least favourite and favourite book of the month, and then I'm also later going to be filming for you a book wrap up, which will be a breakdown of all the books that I read and what I thought of them, and a little bit more of a summary and a chance to talk about them a little bit more. I've decided to do this because it gives me a little bit more flexibility, because then it means that my wrap-ups at the end of each month can really focus on the stats and diversity in what I'm reading. And I'm going to trial doing something a bit more like a sort of recent reads video, or maybe a mid-month wrap-up where I can talk about less of the books in more detail, because that way it's two reasons really. One, so the video doesn't get really long. If I've read a lot of books in that month, it means that I can make shorter videos focusing on a few of the books rather than one really long video. Also, I was finding that particularly on months where I've read a lot of books, by the time it gets to the end of the month to talk about them, I can't always remember a lot about them, particularly if they were ones I didn't like as much or I read them right at the start of the month. So I'm going to be playing around with it a bit. It may not stay this format, I may decide I don't like it and go back to my old format, but we'll just have to wait and see. So for now, I'm just going to talk about some of the stats of what I read in February. I have actually even added, since January, I've added another statistic, because I'm a geek, I just really love numbers. Anyway, so in February I read a total of 11 books by 11 different authors. The total number of pages in those books, and I didn't necessarily read all of these pages in February because some of the books I started earlier than that, so the total number of pages was 3001, which meant the books I read in February or finished reading in February had an average length of 273 pages. All of the books I rated 4 or 5 stars, just adding bits to my spreadsheet. So I gave 7 books 4 stars and 4 books 5 stars. So still at the end of February I had not rated it anything less than 4 stars, which was really good. I think that's partly because I'm having issues with my concentration span, so I'm only sort of really reading and focusing on things that I'm really enjoying. If I'm not enjoying it, then I'm not picking it up at the moment. I'm really happy with the way my reading year has started. I have since given a book 3 stars. At the start of February there were 563 books on my Goodreads TBR, and at the end of the month this had gone down to 558. At the start of February there were 28 books on my book death row, and at the end of February this has actually gone up to 32. So I am sort of filtering books, moving them from my TBR to my book death row, the ones I'm not sure about. I think there were a couple that I've decided to unhaul, but that is still positive. And of my book death row books, the 2 that I picked, one of them I did finish in February, which was The Curse of the Kings. I really enjoyed this one, so that was a really positive reading experience for me. And I have a couple of other books by Victoria Holt which are currently still on my book death row. They're going to stay on there, but I feel really positive because of how much I enjoyed this one that I will like those ones too. The other one, which was Sickened by Gregory, I started in February. I actually finished this one in March, but it wasn't a very difficult read, and this was actually the first book this year that I've given 3 stars to, so there's that one. Less enjoyable experience, but I'll talk about that a bit more when I do some of my March reading wrap-up things. Yeah, so my book death row is increasing at the moment, but I'm finding that actually picking 2 a month is helping me get through them or unhaul them, and that's actually, I'd rather books that I'm not sure about be on my death row than just cluttering up my TBR. I am still working through a couple of books every month and reading the first chapter and making a decision which list to put them on or to unhaul them. The book that took me longest to read took 46 days, and the book that was the quickest. There were a couple of books that I read in one day in one sitting. So my average reading length was 12 days. The book that had been on my Goodreads TBR for the longest had been on there for 1,484 days. So that was one of the books that has been on my TBR for the longest, not the overall longest. Haven't got that far yet. And then the book that had been on my TBR the shortest had been on there 5 days, which was one new book that I bought this year. So that gave me an average length of all the books that I read in February. The average length they'd been on my TBR was 384 days, so just over a year. This was because I did read quite a lot of library books this month, so 4 of the books I read in February I got from the library, 5 of them were from my own TBR. 1 book was a new one that I bought this year, and 1 book was a reread. The new stat that I'm introducing this month is whether they were on my published TBR or not, because now that I'm making TBR videos regularly, I thought it might be quite good to see how well I've stuck to that through the month. So 3 of the books I finished in February were on that published TBR for February, which is not great because there were quite a lot on there. I think there were 9 books on that TBR and I finished 3 of them. 1 book was a hangover from my January TBR, and then the other 7 books were not on my TBR at all. So that just goes to show that I always said I'm not very good at sticking to TBRs. Actually, I'm kind of proving that at the moment, and we'll see how that goes throughout the year. I may find that if I'm not doing very well at sticking to my TBRs that I film, then I may just stop making them, but people seem to enjoy watching them, so I'm going to keep doing them if people enjoy watching them, and then you can laugh at me with me when at the end of the month I never have read what I said I'm going to read. The majority of the books I read were paperbacks, that was 8 of them, and 3 were hardbacks, and I read a variety of genres. There were 2 non-fiction, 1 collection of plays, 1 mystery collection, actually that was a short story collection, a couple of fantasy, so there was one that was sort of a historical fantasy, one that was an urban fantasy, and one that was kind of a gothic romance, 1 contemporary, 1 children's fiction. I think that's everything. It was quite a mix of mainly adult books aimed at an adult market, a couple of young adult, and 1 children's book. I read from a wider variety of author nationalities this month, which was quite good. So there was still quite English and American heavy, so there were 3 American authors and 5 English authors, but I did also read a Spanish, a Japanese and an Indian author. That's a little bit more variety in there. In terms of gender identities, the majority were cisgendered women. 7 of the books were written by cisgendered women and 4 were by cisgendered men. Still needing to branch out a little bit more and try and read some transgender and non-binary authors. I have actually managed to read 1 in March already, but still looking for recommendations on that. For the challenges that I have set myself for the year, if you want to know more about those, check out my goals video, I'll link that for you somewhere. I read 5 books from independent publishers, which I'm really pleased with. That's a really good amount to have read in a month. 4 books counted towards my Start on Your Shelf challenge, which is a challenge from the creators of the Quiet Pond blog about tackling some books on your own TBR, so that was good as well. I finished 1 book from my book to throw in the month and 1 book for Read Around the World as well. In terms of author diversities, I read books from Black, Asian and minority ethnic authors, LGBTQIA+ authors, authors with disabilities and authors with mental health representation. And in terms of character diversity, I did again hit all the boxes this month of reading at least 1 book that had representation of Black, Asian and minority ethnic characters, LGBTQIA+, disability, mental health and neurodiversity. It feels really good to know that in my reading I am hitting quite a lot of the diversity markers that I'm looking for, because I think it's really important to widen our knowledge of the world by trying to challenge our reading and not just read about people that are like us and not just read books by people that are like us. So I'm really pleased with that. So that is quite a lot of facts and figures, which is why I thought it might be nice if I'm going to do this more as a stats thing each month. In this video I'm just going to quickly talk about my least favourite and most favourite book of the month. Now when I'm rating everything 4 and 5 stars, it's actually quite difficult to pick a least favourite. So the one I've settled on, it wasn't a bad book, it's just out of all the 4-star books this was probably the one that I enjoyed the least. This was my theology book club book for February, which was The Life and Work of a Priest by Pritchard. This was probably closer to a 3.5 stars, but it's one that I think think I will reread, so that's what just edged it into the 4-star bracket rather than a 3-star, because I don't generally keep books I've rated 3 stars. A lot of the content of this was really good and really helpful, and we had a really good discussion about it at the book club. But what I did find was sometimes the tone was a little bit patronising, and there were just a few bits where I didn't really agree with what he was saying, or I wasn't entirely sure about what he was saying, and just slightly, a little bit didn't quite sit right with me. Of the books that we've read so far for that theology book club, this has been the one that I've enjoyed the least. But it wasn't a bad book. Still gave it 4 stars, so it was a good book. It's very hard to pick a worse book when you've given all your books 4 or 5 stars. And then my favourite book of the month is one I got from the library, which was called The Next Together by Lauren James. So this was Lauren James's debut novel. She is an author that I really love, and I've read most of her books now. The sequel to The Next Together, which I think is called The Last Beginning, I'm going to try and get that out from the library soon. She is one of my favourite authors. She is now an author by author for me. I will be buying my own copies of that series at some point. I've heard a few people talk about The Loneliest Girl in the Universe, which was, I think, her most famous book, but I've not heard anyone talking about The Next Together and The Last Beginning, and I just really thought it was brilliantly written. So the basic premise is these two people, Matthew and Catherine. It's so difficult to explain. They exist in multiple timelines. So the book is split across 4 different time periods, and in each time period there is a pair of there is a Matthew and there is a Catherine, and in each time period they meet and they fall in love and then they die. The story is told in sort of mixed media format, so the most modern pair exist in the year 2039 and they are university students, and they discovered that their relatives, her aunt and his uncle, met 20 years earlier and were framed for some sort of terrorist act, but their families never believed that that was the case. So the newest Matt and Kate decide to investigate what happened to Matthew and Catherine. In doing so, that they discovered that actually there have been previous pairs throughout history. That modern day section is told as a regular story. The story of their relatives, the Matthew and Catherine, are told in sort of a series of emails and reports and notes related to what happened to them, which I think was set around our present day, so around 2019. There's also a storyline set in the Crimean War, and then there's a previous storyline set in the time of the Stuarts, where there is an uprising. It's set in Carlisle, and there's an uprising relating to Bonnie Prince Charlie wanting to come and reclaim the Scottish throne. In each storyline there's this pair of characters, and there's something going on that isn't explained in this first book, which I'm assuming will be explained in the second book, that brings these two characters together each time. It's looking for a specific action from them, but they obviously don't know what it is. They don't know that there's this higher power, there's something that is bringing them together each time. So it's really, really cleverly written. I don't feel like I've done it justice in that explanation. I'm really excited to read the sequel to it, and it was just such a ride. So much happens in quite a short book. If you like slow burn romances, then I think you'll really like this, because you've got the same 2 characters in 4 storylines that you know they're going to fall in love, and you're just waiting for the moment where that happens in each storyline, and it is really cleverly done. Yeah, so that was definitely my favourite book of the month. I finished it right at the end of the month as well, so it was really fresh in my memory. That was all my stats about how I got on with my reading in February, whether I hit some of the challenges I was going for. I should also say as well, actually, I was taking part in the Pondathon in February, and all of those books counted towards my Pondathon challenge, which was to read backlist books. So that was books published before the beginning of 2019. So all of those books hit that target, which I was really pleased about as well. That is all for today, all of my stats for February. Let me know about what your favourite book you read in February was. How do you track your stats? Are you as detailed as me, or are you less bothered about numbers? And please also do let me know if you've got suggestions of any trans or non-binary authors that you think I might enjoy, because I am looking to diversify my reading in that way. If you want more up-to-date information about what books I'm reading, then you can find out on my social media, particularly on Goodreads, and also I'm on Twitter, so all that information will be listed for you in the description box below. If you like this video, please like it, and please think about subscribing if you haven't already. But that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.